The twisted metal scattered across the crater still smoked when Tobias Kane found it. 3 days of tracking the debris field through the barren canyons of Epsilon 7 had led him here, to this moment of discovery that would change everything. Toby adjusted his respirator and stepped carefully around the jagged remnants of what had once been a sleek alien dropship. The Nexari design was unmistakable. Elegant curves now torn and blackened, proud hull plating scattered like broken scales across the gray regolith. This was a military vessel, he realized, noting the weapons pods and tactical markings still visible on larger fragments. A soft sound made him freeze. Not the settling of cooling metal or the whisper of wind through the wreckage, but something organic, something alive. Following the sound deeper into the crash site, Toby discovered the intact passenger compartment, buried beneath a collapsed wing section. His plasma cutter made quick work of the debris, revealing the interior that would haunt his dreams. She lay motionless against the far wall, and for a moment, he thought she was dead. The Nexari female was unlike anything he'd seen in person, tall and graceful even in unconsciousness, with skin that shifted between deep blue and purple like an oil slick. Her hair, a cascade of silver white, was matted with dried blood that shimmered with an otherworldly luminescence. But it was her injuries that made his breath catch. Her left arm was gone entirely, torn away at the shoulder. Her right arm ended in a mangled stump at the elbow. Her left leg was missing from mid-thigh down, the wounds cauterized but obviously infected with some kind of alien bacteria that created patterns of discoloration across her skin. Most shocking of all was the brand burned into her forehead, AI, symbol he recognized from intercepted Nexari communications, the mark of the dishonored, the abandoned. Jesus, he whispered, kneeling beside her. What did they do to you? Her eyes snapped open, brilliant amber with flecks of gold that seemed to glow in the dim light filtering through the wreckage. They focused on him with surprising clarity, and her lips moved in what might have been words in her native tongue. Toby leaned closer. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Her response was a weak snarl, baring teeth that were sharp and predatory. Even broken and dying, she was trying to intimidate him. There was something magnificent about that defiance. You're Nexari military, he said, recognizing the tactical harness beneath her torn clothing. Elite by the look of it, but they left you here, didn't they? Marked you as defective and abandoned you to die. Something flickered in those amber eyes. Shame, rage, or perhaps just pain. She tried to speak again, but only managed a whisper. Toby made a decision that would have been suicide in any civilized part of the galaxy. The war between humans and the Nexari hegemony had been raging for 15 years. Harboring an enemy combatant, even a broken one, was treason at best and a death sentence at worst. But looking at her lying there, abandoned by her own people like a piece of broken equipment, he saw something that transcended species and politics. He saw someone who had been thrown away, just like he had been. My name's Tobias, he told her, carefully lifting her remaining hand. Toby, and I'm going to get you out of here. The journey back to his workshop took 6 hours, navigating the treacherous canyon paths with her unconscious form secured to his gravitic sled. She was heavier than a human woman would be, her bones denser, but she felt fragile in his arms as he carried her inside. His workshop occupied a series of natural caves he'd expanded and fortified over the past 3 years. Hidden sensors and defense systems protected the entrance, while the interior housed everything a master mechanic might need. Fabrication units, medical equipment salvaged from a dozen different species, and most importantly, privacy. He laid her on the medical table and began the delicate work of keeping her alive. Her physiology was similar enough to human that standard medical protocols applied, but different enough to make every decision dangerous. The infection was spreading, and her remaining limbs showed signs of systematic amputation rather than battlefield injury. They had cut her apart deliberately, he realized with growing horror. This wasn't combat damage. This was punishment. As he worked through the night cleaning wounds and administering broad-spectrum antibiotics, Toby found himself studying her face. Even unconscious and ravaged by pain, she possessed a fierce beauty that spoke of strength and pride. What kind Of warrior had she been before they broke her? What had she done to earn such brutal treatment from her own kind? When dawn crept through the workshop's skylights, she stirred. Her eyes opened, clearer now, and fixed on him with an intensity that made him step back. "Why?" she whispered in accented standard. Her voice was rough but melodious, like wind through crystal chimes. "Why what?" "Why save the enemy?" Toby considered the question while he checked her IV lines. Maybe because we're both outcasts now. Maybe because nobody else would. She studied him for a long moment, those amber eyes taking in his scarred hands, his graying hair, the loneliness that probably showed in his face. "I am Vexani of the Crimson Talon," she said finally. I am... She struggled with the words. "I am nothing now." "You're alive," Toby replied simply. "That's something." For the first time since he'd found her, something almost like hope flickered in her expression. It was quickly hidden, but he'd seen it. That was enough to start with. 3 weeks had passed since Toby brought Vexani to his workshop, and she was finally strong enough to sit upright for extended periods. The infection had retreated, leaving behind intricate patterns of scarring that looked almost like natural markings across her blue-purple skin. She watched him work with intense curiosity, those amber eyes tracking his every movement as he fabricated the components that would become her new limbs. "Your people," she said one morning as he calibrated neural interfaces, "they build such crude things, but you create art." Toby looked up from the delicate circuitry spread across his workbench. The cybernetic arm taking shape there was indeed beautiful. Sleek lines that echoed her natural anatomy while incorporating the best of salvaged tech from a dozen different species. Function over form was never my philosophy. If you're going to live with something for the rest of your life, it should be beautiful. "The rest of my life," she repeated, testing the words. "The hegemony teaches that a warrior's life ends when they can no longer serve. I should have died in that crash." "But you didn't." He set down his tools and moved to her side. Over the weeks, he'd grown comfortable with her presence, though she still tensed whenever he came too close. "Tell me about your life before. What made you become a warrior?" Vexani's expression darkened. "I was bred for war like all Nexari, selected for the Crimson Talon at 16 cycles, trained to be perfect. No weakness, no mercy, no failure." Her voice carried bitter pride. "I was the finest hunter in my unit. 37 human colonies fell to my planning. I was death given form." The admission hung between them like a blade. Toby had suspected her military background was extensive, but hearing the numbers made his hands shake slightly. She had killed thousands, maybe tens of thousands of his people. "And now?" he asked quietly. "Now I am nothing. Nexari doctrine is absolute. Perfection or death. When the transport was hit and I lost my limbs, my commander ordered me abandoned. The brand on my forehead marks me as flawed beyond redemption. In Nexari space, any who aid me face the same fate." Toby reached out slowly, his fingers tracing the raised scar on her forehead. She flinched but didn't pull away. "Then it's a good thing we're not in Nexari space." Something shifted in her expression, vulnerability replacing the constant wariness. "Why do you touch me without fear? I am a trained killer who has spilled rivers of human blood." "Because you're not that person anymore. Pain changes us, breaks us down to who we really are underneath all the conditioning." He continued working on the neural interface, his voice becoming softer. "I wasn't always a hermit mechanic on a forgotten moon. I used to be Lieutenant Commander Tobias Kane of the Human Defense Corps. Lost my entire unit in the Vega offensive, walked into a Nexari trap that killed 43 good people." Vexani went very still. "The Vega offensive. I planned that ambush. The revelation should have been devastating, should have destroyed the fragile trust growing between them. Instead, Toby found himself oddly calm. Then we're both carrying the weight of that day. The difference is I chose to save you instead of seeking revenge. I do not understand your kind, she whispered. You should hate me. You should have left me to die. Maybe. But then I'd have missed getting to know who you really are. He finished the calibration and held up the completed arm. The cybernetic limb was a masterwork of engineering, its surface polished to mirror her natural skin tones while housing strength far beyond biological limits. Ready to try this on? The fitting process required intimate contact as Toby connected neural pathways and calibrated responses. Vexani lay back on the medical table, her breathing shallow as he worked at the connection points near her shoulder. The scarred tissue was sensitive and she gasped when he brushed against certain areas. Does it hurt? He asked, pausing. No, not hurt. Different. Intense. Her pupils were dilated, and her voice carried a breathless quality he hadn't heard before. Your touch is gentle. Nexari do not touch with gentleness. Their faces were inches apart as he leaned over to secure the final connections. Her unique scent, something like ozone and exotic flowers, filled his senses. When she looked up at him, the walls she'd built around herself seemed to crumble. Vexani, he whispered. My true name, she said softly. My birth name before the military claimed me was Vexi. Only my mother called me that. Vexi. He tested the name and she shivered at the sound. It's beautiful. The cybernetic arm activated with a soft hum. Neural signals raced through artificial pathways and slowly, carefully her new fingers moved. The sensation was overwhelming. After weeks of phantom pain and emptiness, she could feel again. But more than that, she could feel Toby's hands, guiding hers, showing her how to control the sensitivity settings. It's perfect, she breathed, flexing the fingers with growing confidence. How did you know exactly how it should feel? I watched you sleep, he admitted. Watched how you moved in your dreams, the gestures you made when you were remembering. I wanted it to feel like it belonged to you, not like a tool strapped to your body. The simple admission of such careful attention broke something loose inside her. In Nexari culture, observation meant surveillance, meant finding weakness to exploit. But Toby had watched her to understand, to help, to heal. When she reached up with her new hand to touch his face, he didn't pull away. Her artificial fingertips could feel the roughness of his beard, the warmth of his skin, the way his breath caught when she traced the line of his jaw. You have given me back a piece of myself, she said. Among my people, such a gift creates a debt that can only be repaid with life itself. I don't want your life, Toby replied, his own hand covering hers. I just want you to have the chance to choose what to do with it. The kiss was inevitable, soft and hesitant at first. Then, deeper as weeks of growing trust and attraction finally found expression. Her new hand tangled in his hair while his arms wrapped around her, careful of her remaining injuries but no longer afraid of her strength. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. The workshop around them seemed different somehow, charged with possibilities neither had dared consider before. Tomorrow we begin work on your leg, Toby said, his forehead resting against hers. Tomorrow, she agreed, but her amber eyes promised that something far more significant than cybernetics would be built between them in the days to come. The completion of Vexi's cybernetic leg marked a transformation neither of them had anticipated. Where her original limb had been graceful but limited by biology, the replacement was a marvel of engineering that granted her capabilities beyond any natural Nexari. The artificial muscles could generate 3 times normal strength, the joints moved with perfect precision, and integrated sensors gave her awareness of pressure, temperature, and texture that rivaled organic nerves. Try the balance sequence again, Toby instructed, watching from across the workshop as she moved through a series of combat forms. 6 weeks of recovery and rehabilitation had restored her confidence, and now she moved like liquid lightning, each gesture flowing seamlessly into the next. Vexi spun, her cybernetic leg anchoring her while her natural leg swept in a perfect arc. The movement would have been impossible before, The torque required would have torn biological joints apart. Now she landed in a crouch that spoke of predatory grace, amber eyes bright with exhilaration. "It's extraordinary," she breathed, examining her new limbs in wonder. "I am stronger than I ever was, faster, more precise. You have not just rebuilt me, you have improved me." "You were already perfect," Toby said, meaning it. "I just gave you new tools to express that perfection." The compliment made her pause mid-stretch. Nexari culture had no concept of inherent worth. Value came only through achievement, through successful completion of assigned duties. But Toby spoke of her perfection as something that existed independent of her actions, something that belonged to her simply by virtue of being herself. "Show me your combat techniques," she said suddenly. "I have been wondering how humans fight without our natural advantages." Toby laughed, but she could see the practiced way he moved as he came toward her, the careful balance that spoke of military training. "I'm more of a thinker than a fighter, but I did learn a few things in the Corps." What followed was less combat training than an elaborate dance. Toby demonstrated human martial arts, flowing movements that emphasized leverage and timing over raw strength. Vexi countered with Nexari techniques that showcased speed and precision. Soon they were sparring in earnest. Her cybernetic enhancements balanced against his experience and tactical thinking. She was faster, stronger, more skilled, but he was unpredictable, using tools from around the workshop as improvised weapons, turning every surface into potential advantage. When she finally pinned him against the workbench, both were breathing hard and gleaming with perspiration. "You fight like an engineer," she said, her face inches from his. "Always looking for the elegant solution instead of the direct approach." "You fight like poetry," he replied, his hands resting on her waist. "Beautiful and deadly." The attraction that had been building between them for weeks suddenly blazed into something urgent. When she kissed him this time, there was nothing hesitant about it. Her cybernetic hand fisted in his shirt, while her natural hand traced the muscles of his back, mapping the scars that told the story of his military service. Toby lifted her onto the workbench, scattering tools and components. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her enhanced strength allowing her to pull him closer with ease. The kiss deepened, became hungrier, as hands explored and clothing began to disappear. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her throat, his lips tracing the elegant curve of her neck. "Your people, my people. This changes everything." "Everything was already changed the moment you chose to save me," she replied, her voice husky with desire. "I have never. Nexari do not form attachments. We breed for genetic optimization, nothing more. This feeling, this need, I do not understand it, but I trust it." "Then trust me," he said, and proceeded to show her pleasures her warrior culture had never imagined. Their lovemaking was a revelation for both of them. Toby discovered that her enhanced sensitivity extended to every nerve, ending, that her responses were heightened by the cybernetic interfaces he'd so carefully calibrated. Vexi learned that intimacy could be about giving pleasure as much as receiving it, that vulnerability could be strength rather than weakness. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the makeshift bed he'd assembled in the corner of the workshop, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. The workshop's skylights showed the alien constellations of Epsilon 7's night sky. But for the first time since awakening here, Vexi felt like she was home. "Tell me about your world," she said, tracing patterns on his skin with her cybernetic fingers. "Not the military reports or strategic assessments. Tell me what it was like to be a child there." Toby's voice grew soft as he spoke of Earth's blue, skies of seasons changing and rain falling on green fields. He told her about his sister's laugh, about the smell of his mother's cooking, about dreams of becoming an explorer before the war changed everything. "And you?" he asked. "What was Vexi like before she became Vexani the warrior?" "I loved to sing," she admitted, the confession feeling like a dangerous secret. "Young Nexari are tested for various aptitudes and music was mine. But songs do not win battles, so they redirected my training toward tactical analysis instead." "Sing for me now." She hesitated, then began a melody in her native tongue, something haunting and beautiful that spoke of starlight and longing. Her voice was trained but unused, rusty from years of suppression, yet still achingly lovely. Toby listened with his eyes closed, and when the song ended, she saw tears on his cheeks. "Beautiful," he whispered. "You're so much more than they ever let you be. As are you. The man who saved me, who rebuilt me with such care. He is not the broken soldier who came to this moon to hide." They made love again as the twin moons set, slower this time, exploring each other with wonder and growing love. When dawn came, they remained entwined, neither wanting to break the spell that had transformed them both. "What happens now?" Vexy asked, watching the sunrise paint the workshop walls gold and amber. "Now we choose our own path. No more hiding, no more shame. Whatever comes, we face it together." But even as he spoke, both of them knew that the universe rarely allowed such happiness to go unchallenged. In the depths of space, Nexari ships were already moving, following energy signatures and scattered reports. The hegemony had decided that the dishonor of Vexani's continued existence could no longer be tolerated. The reckoning was coming, but for now, in the quiet sanctuary of the workshop, two souls who had found each other against all odds chose to believe in tomorrow. Vexy pressed closer to Toby's warmth, her enhanced senses already detecting the subtle changes in air pressure that meant weather moving in from the south. But she also detected something else. The faint vibration of subspace engines, still days away but definitely approaching. She said nothing. This moment of peace was too precious to destroy with warnings of what was coming. Instead, she kissed his shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Tobias Kane." "I love you too, Vexy," he replied, and in that exchange of true names and deeper truth, they sealed a bond that would soon be tested by fire. The proximity alarm shattered the morning peace with their harsh electronic screaming. Toby rolled from bed, instantly alert, while Vexy was already moving toward the weapon locker with predatory grace. 3 months of happiness had not dulled their survival instincts. "How many?" she asked, her voice cold with professional calm as she strapped on tactical gear. 4 ships, heavy cruiser configuration," Toby replied, scanning the sensor displays. "Nexari design. They're broadcasting on military frequencies." Vexy's face went pale beneath her blue-purple skin. "They have come for me. I had hoped, but no, the hegemony never forgets a dishonor." The communication array crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the workshop. "Vexani of the formerly Crimson Talon, you will present yourself for termination. Your continued existence is an affront to Nexari honor." "Zektar," Vexy whispered, her cybernetic hand clenching into a fist. "My former commander. You will also surrender the human who has aided you," the voice continued. "His crimes against the natural order demand cleansing by pain." Toby moved to stand beside her, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "How long do we have?" "They will not bombard from orbit. Too quick, too clean. Zektar will want to make an example of us, to ensure our deaths serve as a lesson to others." She was already moving through the workshop, activating hidden defense systems Toby hadn't even known existed. "He will land his forces and come for us personally. Then we make them work for it." The next hour was a blur of preparation. Toby activated every defensive measure his paranoid years in exile had taught him to build. Automated turrets, energy shields, even a few surprises he'd cobbled together from salvaged ordnance. Vexy moved through combat preparations with deadly efficiency, her enhanced body allowing her to carry weapons that would have overwhelmed her before. "There is something you must know," she said as they took positions at the workshop's main entrance. "Zektar was my mate, in the Nexari way. Selected for genetic compatibility, nothing more. But he believed it made him possess me. Does that change anything for you?" Toby asked, though his hands never paused in their weapons check. "It changes nothing. He forfeited any claim when he branded me and left me to die." Her amber eyes met his. "You saved me. You loved me. You gave Me choice, he only ever gave orders. The first assault came from multiple directions. Nexari dropped troops repelling from hovering transports while ground forces moved up the canyon approaches. Toby's automated defenses cut down the first wave, but more kept coming. 43. Confirmed, Vexy reported, her enhanced senses tracking movement through the rocky terrain. Elite units, full tactical gear. Any chance they'll accept surrender? None. This is about honor and fear. If one cast out can survive and thrive, others might try the same. The battle was brutal and efficient. Nexari warriors were individually superior to most enemies, but they had never faced the combination of human ingenuity and enhanced Nexari abilities. Toby's improvised weapons and tactical thinking complemented Vexy's enhanced speed and strength perfectly. She moved like lightning given form, her cybernetic limbs allowing impossible feats of agility and power. She could leap between canyon walls, strike with enough force to shatter armor, and move faster than most enemies could track. But it was her tactical brilliance, unconstrained by Nexari doctrine, that truly made her deadly. Northeast wall. Breach. In 30 seconds, she called out, her enhanced hearing detecting the subtle sounds of plasma cutters. On it. Toby triggered a trap he'd spent years perfecting, shaped charges that brought down a carefully calculated rockfall, sealing the breach and crushing the assault team. But for every victory, more enemies appeared. They were being overwhelmed. By sheer numbers, Zektar approaches, Vexy announced, her sensors detecting a familiar energy signature. He comes alone. He wants to face me personally. The workshop's main door exploded inward, revealing a figure that made Vexy's breath catch. Zektar was everything she remembered, tall and imposing, his natural Nexari strength enhanced by military augmentations. But where she had found love and growth, he radiated only cold fury. Vexani, he said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Look what you have become. Polluted by alien touch, your body corrupted with crude machinery. You are no longer Nexari. You're right, she replied, stepping forward to meet him. I am something better. Their combat was a thing of terrible beauty. Two perfectly trained warriors enhanced beyond natural limits, fighting with centuries of accumulated technique and personal fury. Zektar was stronger, his augmentations more comprehensive. But Vexy fought with something he had never possessed, the knowledge that she was protecting something precious. While they battled, Toby found himself facing the remaining assault troops. His ammunition was running low, his defenses failing one by one. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, spinning him around, and he saw more enemies moving to flank his position. Then Vexy's voice rang out across the battlefield, not in words, but in song. The haunting melody she had shared with him in their most intimate moments now rose above the chaos of combat. And something impossible happened. Her cybernetic enhancements, designed by someone who loved her, began to resonate with the frequencies of her voice. Power flowed through artificial muscles, speed increased beyond normal parameters, and her strikes became precise beyond belief. Zektar's confident assault faltered as she moved like nothing he had ever faced. Her cybernetic arm caught his blade and twisted, shattering the weapon. Her enhanced leg swept his feet, sending him crashing to the ground. This is impossible, he gasped, staring up at her in shock. You are broken, cast out. Nothing. I am loved, she replied simply, and drove her cybernetic fist through his chest. The remaining Nexari forces, seeing their commander fallen, began to retreat, but Vexy knew better than to assume victory. More ships would come. The hegemony would not stop until both she and Toby were dead. We have to go, she said, helping him bind his wounds. This is only the beginning. I know. Toby was already moving toward the hidden hangar where he kept his ship. I've been preparing for this day since I first found you. As they gathered essential supplies and equipment, Vexy paused at the workbench where he had rebuilt her. This place had been their sanctuary, their beginning, their home. Leaving it felt like tearing away a piece of her heart. Regrets? Toby, asked, seeing her hesitation. No, she said firmly. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That is all I need. The ship that rose from the hidden hangar was sleek and fast, built for running rather than fighting. As Epsilon 7 fell away beneath them, both knew they were leaving their old lives behind forever. But they were also flying towards something new, a future they would build together, free from the constraints that had once defined them. The galaxy was vast, full of places where a human and a Nexari could start fresh. All they had to do was survive long enough to find one. The pursuit had lasted 6 weeks across half the galaxy, a deadly game of cat and mouse through asteroid fields, nebulae, and forgotten systems. Toby's ship was fast and well hidden, but Nexari persistence was legendary. They had tracked the fugitives to the edge of explored space, to a system where 3 dying stars cast red light on worlds that had never known civilization. Final approach, Toby announced, bringing their vessel toward a massive space station that hung in the darkness like a metallic flower. Haven Station, neutral territory, no questions asked, no extradition treaties. Vexy studied the approaching structure with tactical eyes. It is beautiful, she said, and meant it. The station was clearly built from salvaged ships of a dozen different species, welded together with engineering skill and artistic vision. Who built this place? Refugees mostly, people like us who fell through the cracks of galactic politics. He guided the ship toward a docking bay marked with symbols in several languages. The woman who runs it lost her homeworld in the Centauri purges. She understands what it means to need sanctuary. The docking process was smooth, automated systems, guiding them to a berth without need for communication. When the airlock sealed and atmosphere equalized, they gathered their few possessions and prepared to step into their new life. The station's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers that reflected its cobbled-together origins, but everywhere, Vexy looked, she saw signs of community. Children playing in corridors designed as gardens, merchants hawking goods from 100 worlds, couples walking hand in hand without regard for species or origin. "Welcome to Haven," said a voice behind them. They turned to see a woman approaching, human, middle-aged, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much but still held kindness. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez. This is my station." "Tobias Kane," Toby replied. "This is Vexy. We were told you might have space for us." Elena's gaze took in Vexy's cybernetic enhancements, the careful way they moved together, the subtle signs of recent combat. Running from something or someone? Both. Vexy answered honestly. "My people consider our love a crime worthy of death." "Their loss," Elena said with a shrug. "Love is rare enough in this galaxy without letting politics destroy it. You're welcome here as long as you follow our rules. No violence except in self-defense. Contribute to the community according to your abilities and respect others' right to sanctuary." They were assigned quarters in a section of the station that had once been a passenger liner, small but comfortable, with a viewport that looked out at the red giant stars. For the first time in weeks, they could sleep without fear of pursuit. But even in safety, both knew their journey was far from over. "The hegemony will not stop searching," Vexy said as they lay together that first night, her cybernetic fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "They cannot allow the precedent of my survival to inspire others." "Then we make sure we're harder to find," Toby replied. "Elena offered me work in the engineering section. This place needs constant maintenance, and I can help upgrade their defensive systems. And I can train their security forces. Many here have never learned to fight, but the galaxy is dangerous for the unprepared." Over the following months, they built a new life among the refugees and outcasts of Haven Station. Toby's engineering skills proved invaluable in maintaining the cobbled-together structure, while Vexy's tactical knowledge helped transform the station's ragtag security force into a competent defensive unit. But more than that, they found purpose in helping others who had lost everything. Vexy taught combat techniques to those who needed to defend themselves, but she also shared something more precious, the knowledge that it was possible to rebuild from nothing, to become more than what others expected. You have changed, Toby observed one evening as they watched the sunset through their viewport. 6 months on Haven had brought out aspects of Vexy's personality that military conditioning had never allowed to develop. So have you, she replied, curling closer to his warmth. The broken soldier who saved me is gone. In his place is a man who builds rather than destroys, who teaches rather than commands. We saved each other, he said, kissing the top of her head. 2 broken pieces that fit together to make something whole. Their peaceful existence was interrupted by a priority message from the station's communication array. Elena's face appeared on their private screen, expression grim. We have visitors, she said without preamble. A Nexari diplomatic vessel just dropped out of hyperspace. They're requesting permission to board. Toby and Vexy exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been dreading and preparing for. Terms? Vexy asked. They claim to be offering amnesty in exchange for your voluntary return. They also claim to have a personal message for you from someone called First Singer Aelin. Vexy went very still. My mother, she whispered. My birth mother, whom I have not seen since childhood. The meeting took place in Haven's main conference room, under the watchful eyes of Elena's security team. The Nexari delegation was small, just 3 individuals led by a female officer whose bearing suggested high rank. I am Commander Thysi of the Diplomatic Corps, the leader announced. I bring greetings from First Singer Aelin and an offer of amnesty for the one called Vexani. I am Vexy, she replied using her birth name deliberately. Speak your message. This activated a holographic projector, and suddenly the room was filled with the image of an older Nexari female whose features echoed Vexy's own. When she spoke, her voice carried the trained resonance of a master singer. My daughter, the image said, and Vexy's breath caught. I have watched from afar as you forged a new path, have seen how you chose love over duty, growth over stagnation. The old ways are failing us. Our birth rate declines. Our people grow brittle with enforced perfection. Perhaps it is time to learn from those we cast out. The message continued, revealing that Aelin had risen to a position of influence within the hegemony, that a faction of progressive Nexari were quietly questioning the rigid orthodoxy that had governed their species for millennia. Return with us, this said when the message ended. Not as a criminal, but as a teacher. Show our people what you have learned about adaptation, about love, about becoming more than what we were designed to be. And Toby? Vexy asked. The human would be welcome as well. We need to understand how other species think, how they build the connections that make them strong. It was a generous offer, a chance to transform an entire civilization. But Vexy looked around the conference room at the faces watching her, beings from a dozen species who had found refuge and community on Haven Station, and she knew her answer. I am honored by my mother's wisdom and your offer, she said formally. But my place is here with those who need what I can teach. If the hegemony wishes to learn new ways, let them send students to us. We will welcome them as we welcome all who seek sanctuary. Tis looked disappointed but not surprised. And if we leave and do not return? If the hegemony decides your example is too dangerous to allow? Then we will be ready, Vexy replied simply. After the diplomatic vessel departed, Toby found Vexy on the observation deck staring out at the stars. Regrets? He asked, echoing her words from months before. None, she said, turning into his arms. This is where we belong, building something new, helping others find their own paths to freedom. The hegemony may still come for us. Then we will face them together, as we always have. She kissed him softly, tasting the future on his lips. But I think they will not. Change is coming to the galaxy, and we are part of that change. Years later, when Haven Station had grown into a small city and dozens of Nexari refugees had found their way to sanctuary, when Toby and Vexy's love story had become legend among the outcasts and dreamers of the galaxy, they would still spend evenings watching the stars. They had been broken when they found each other, discarded pieces of lives that no longer fit the worlds that made them. But together they had built something beautiful. Not just their love, but a community where broken things could heal, where the cast out could find home, where two hearts beating as one could change the universe. In the end, that was the most human thing of all. The refusal to accept that broken meant worthless, that different meant wrong, that love was not the strongest force in all the galaxy. Their story became a beacon for others, proof that sometimes the greatest victories come, not from conquest, but from the simple act of choosing to save what others would throw away. And in the depths of space, on worlds where rigid orthodoxy still held sway, young voices began to sing new songs, melodies that spoke of choice and change, of love that transcended species and custom, of two souls who had found in each other the courage to remake the stars.